It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I pay my respects to them and their cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging of the land I am standing on today. I extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who listen to this. You know that this show has featured a variety of different people. We've covered a variety of different subjects. Today, we're talking with someone who takes leadership and entrepreneurship very seriously. It's just who he is. His name is Rob. Well, Robert actually. Robert Glazer is the name. Under his leadership, his companies have been awarded awards in Glassdoor's Best Places to Work, Ad Age's Best Places to Work, Entrepreneur's Top Company Culture, Inc. Magazine Best Places to Work, Fortune Best Small and Medium Workplaces, Boston Globe Top Workplaces.
Let me share my largest mistake is an entrepreneur, leader, or anything. So, and I think this is pretty true. Someone once said, the longest day in an entrepreneur's life is the time between what they know they have to do and what they do it. And I think a lot of times we're people pleasers. We feel like our job is to not be the bad guy, but we have really good vision. Like I'm pretty good at telling you what's about to come around the corner. If you go back to my book, Performance Partnerships, 3-4 years ago, and it said, here's what's going to go on in the affiliate industry and the marketing industry. And in 2020, it's pretty much all happening. Like that's what I'm good at, kind of seeing how the pieces of something will come together. Well, in that, you see some of these things and you know how it's going to end, but you're like, well, if I just don't have that discussion with Ronsley, maybe that'll go away, or, well, this person, maybe they'll get better. And it never does. It never does. So, someone said, like, the conversation you're not having is the one you need to have. Like the everything that I sort of tried to wish away only got worse. and I think that's been one of my biggest learnings. And I've just gotten impatient for that. And I'm much more direct now, much more on the early side and saying, hey, look, this is what I see is happening or going to happen. And it's, because it never got better. Putting off that conversation or that decision never made it better or easier in the long run, only harder.
Robert Glazer is remarkable, and he boils it all down to one thing. Just one thing. Core values.
I think, so a couple of things. I think values is a self-discovery process. I kind of think you're trying to you came out without an instruction manual and you're trying to understand that manual because it tells you how the machine works. And so I think values evolve. I think as you have these life experiences, one or two might evolve, but you can trace most of them back to when you were much younger and just consistent things that have been always true to you or from a formative experience are hardwired. So I think that you can evolve some values. Like if you have a massive betrayal at some point in your life, like trust may become an important value to you. But to me, it's actually a process of self-discovery. It's like, I know them, I feel them, I know when they were crossed, but I can't actually put words to it to keep myself out of trouble before I hit the wall. I talk about it like a car that's in a tunnel. When take the Lamborghini, drive it through a tunnel with the lights off, you hit a wall, you scratch, you bounce off. Like if I turn on the lights and painted the lines, that would be you saying, oh, I know what my values are. I'm going to stay away from the walls. And I talk a little bit about my book, Elevate, how to start on that process. It's the thing I get asked about the most. So you don't even know this. I thought it was so important for our leaders, acceleration partners, that we built out a curriculum to help them understand their personal core values, because I think it's how they lead. It's how they interact with their team. It's how they figure out whether they're doing the right thing. We really not perfected, but we got that process to where it's really effective over the last couple of years. And other people were like, well, I read your tips in Elevate, but how do I figure this out? So I actually turned it into a course, and it should be live by the time this thing launches. So I have a first course that will walk you through the process that I think really can put you on the path to identifying 3 or 4 core values that you should have on your desk. And when you have those big decisions, and when I say particularly the big 3, or 4, where are you going to live? Who are you going to partner with? Where are you going to work? Who are you going to associate with? Like, those should be value-based decisions, because if they're not, it won't end well. You can marry or partner with someone who doesn't have the same interests as you, who doesn't have the same hobbies or whatever. But if you don't have the same values, you're misaligned on the big stuff. I just don't think it's going to work.
By the way, core values equals start with why.
So where do you start when you have a program that's about integrating life's passions? Well, you start with why. Why? And that kicks us off for the first speaker tonight, Simon Sinek, in his talk, Start with Why.
We assume even we know why we do what we do. But then how do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different?
That was the start to Simon Sinek and his very popular TED Talk, Start With Why. I recommend the book and all his work. Core values is a thrown around term in the business world and work world. But I suppose to truly understand where core values helps most is probably as a parent.
My kids are old enough now that you see that them calling you on stuff out. I just taught my daughter to drive, and now she's critiquing my driving nonstop, which I told her she really shouldn't do as a 16-year-old with her license, because, when she dings up the car in a couple of weeks, then I don't want to hear that. So, but I think you see yourself through the eyes of your children. You hear the things that you say, the behaviors, and you say, oh, am I really doing that? Or they call you out on the things that, you taught them. And so that's interesting. And you also see at some point, that they're different and how you can't control it. And you need to, I think the most important thing that parents have not done in the last 20 years is shift from being, manager to coach to general manager, right? I mean, they stay in that manager role. Manager's great for 0 to 7 or 8 or 9, but like, you really got to switch to coach or mentor or, board member, and make that shift so that they're making their own mistakes and figuring it out. And to our point before, you're not going in there and crossing the line and taking the shot for them, because there's been a whole generation of that. And I think the data is pretty clear that it's fairly detrimental.
According to 2009 research conducted by the Kaufman Foundation, nearly 60% of entrepreneurs had at least one child when they started their first business. Like entrepreneurship, parenting demands a lot of your time and attention, but studies show that entrepreneurial love is strikingly similar to paternal love. So it's no surprise that you can apply some of what you've learned from one area to the other.
Here is something about Rob, because what I am going to present later about leading in your business as a leader, that's really important for you to know. But first, context.
There's an inflection point for me. I alluded to it in one or both of the books, just because it came to the core values. A pretty deep leadership thing that I went to that was very introspective around 6 or 7 years ago. We were just starting. I think we were growing, but we were kind of clunking along. And I don't think I had the conviction I tried to make too many people happy and to say, like, this is who we are. This is who we're not. These are my values. I really went to figure out my core values. I really looked at that, and I was actually frustrated that I felt like I had a lot of good ideas. People weren't hearing them. People that I looked at that seemed like jokes, had all this writing and all these platforms, and I was like, why is that not me? And that very sort of like, not victim mentality, but that like I was unlucky or it was the universe versus like, you know what? I need to lock in. I need to just go do this and I need to not apologize. And so that for me was a huge commitment that I was living below my capacity, that it really was about me. I needed to just go do the work, stop not blaming, but stop thinking that it was outside of me and not within me. So that was a really big inflection point. We also had an inflection point a couple of years later as we were growing the business, where we hit some bumps. We have a great board. We pay them to beat us up and have that check and balance. And we had this board meeting, and we had just it was not a good 3 to 6 months, and they kind of like chewed us out. They're like, "You guys are coming here confident and plans, and now you're coming to us with your tail between your legs. Like, go find your mojo and like get." Get back to it. And look, this is why you want to have those types of people in your life. Like you don't want the people who just tell you, "Oh, it's okay, and I understand." You want to be like, get the hell up and dust yourself off. And so that was a really important inflection point. We made some hard decisions. The company really started to grow after that. So those are two that come to mind where we were, pretty like we were pretty down in that business sense, and also. I really just was like, I was personally, I think, with the business was holding back from really like the risk that I would have to take to try to be great and not worry about everyone else.
And it's all about playing to your strengths. Well, not all about, but maybe I'll correct that and say it's all about not feeling guilty, because, that's made up in our minds, right? Guilt. That is. But Rob was saying,
it comes back to the values thing for me. So one of the things I realized is that I am the best father that I can be when I am doing stuff that is aligned to my values. And that may sound like obvious, but it's not. I actually think it means that I try to play with my kids to my strengths, and I excuse myself from my weaknesses. So right, I'm an entrepreneur. I have ADD. I told you about my less than stellar early track record. Like, I don't sit through classes and stuff that like I can't sit still like in a long, and particularly if I'm bored. If it's Richard Branson giving a fireside chat, like I'm captivated, but bored. So like back to school nights, like it's not my thing. Like I can go there. I am in like a different room. I'm not there. I just started opting out. I'm like, look, I love my kids, but I don't need to go sit in a room and listen to a pre-recorded thing, and my head's not even there. So when I'm doing like, some of my values is finding a better way and sharing it. When I'm doing with my kids activities that like I really love and are aligned with my value, like I can be really good. It's hard for me to pretend to like things I don't like or do things that I don't like. And this is where my wife and I have some good complementary, things. So I've kind of given myself permission to be bad in these other areas and not feel guilty about not going back to school night. Like I'm useless there. Like I'm a figurehead there.
There are all these roles, right? And sometimes if you get how other things work, it makes it easier to understand, especially something like coaching.
The number one rule, it's funny, until someone said it to me, like the difference between any coach in athletics and a leader in business is that the leader can walk into the game at any time. They can jump into the call, they can take the thing, they can, so but what a coach can do is provide the playbook, provide the sideline coaching, during it, and then they can provide, what do they do next? You go watch tape and you do the debrief, right? That is and none of those things involve you stepping into the game and taking the shot. And look, that's what the military probably would use too. So you do a pre-brief. I think there's certain opportunities. Look, if it's a live call, I let's say with a client, I can do some subtle redirection, coaching, not doing it. And then I do the debrief. And, you hear this a lot with good salespeople, good sales managers and trainers. Listen to the call, let them blow the sale, and then debrief with them afterwards, right? Those that try to go in and save that individual opportunity often do a much poor job of training high performing salespeople. What they do is they maximize the short term, and they maybe saved that account, but in saving that account, they did not build the team up as much as they could.
When we come back, playing to your strengths, exactly how to do it, and most importantly, how to build everything from your core values.
Psychology of entrepreneurship.
The main objective of this audio project is to bring together entrepreneurs and creatives who share similar values so that they can find the courage to put out their authentic voice for the right people to hear, which allows for them to make their impact on the world. Every great movement started with a memorable speech. For access to full-length interviews, go to psychologyofentrepreneurship.com and click the button.
Let's get some definitions out of the way, but maybe Rob doesn't really care about definitions.
And I have this opinion on this, like entrepreneur, like founder's a founder. But you see founders, like it's all ego. If you are founder, president, CEO, whatever, like of a 4-person company, then it's either ego or multiple personality, right? But I never took the CEO title because to me, you can be founder, you can be president, you can be leader, but the CEO is a chief executive officer. It is the officer overseeing the executives. If you are all of the executives in the company, then you're not really playing a CEO role. Like you are all the roles. So you'd be having discussions with yourself. So I actually felt like the right time to take that role was when we had a full executive team. But I still have a president who runs the day to day. We fully understand the stuff that I like to work on, he likes to work on. And I don't know if I'll have that CEO role forever. And that's okay, because I think some point the needs of the role will change. And, if you told me that my job's now to sit in front of, investors all day or all that stuff, I'd say, that's not what I like to do. I want to go create some stuff and train some people and launch some new products. So you need that entrepreneurial spark. I think the businesses that grow and scale, the entrepreneur, looks within themselves and one of two things happens. They say, I want to be the leader of this organization. And so I need to evolve and double my skills and I want to do that, and I'm willing to do that. And you can opt out of this journey at any point. Or you can say, you know what? I love sales. I love marketing. I was a finance person. I want to do this role. And they're honest with themselves about the role that they want to play. The ones where and I've seen big companies where the founder is still the CEO and they're not good at it and it's not what they want to do, and they're hurting the company. And eventually, usually an investor throws them out versus them, making that decision earlier.
Okay, well, what about how to delegate better when you lead? Because that is probably the one thing I've seen our clients struggle with. It's something I struggle with.
There are two main jumps for me that were probably the same. I mean, first was deciding to let go of things and trust people, and particularly finance. I think that's a hard area. So just even making that decision that someone else is better and that I shouldn't be doing this is one. But then learning to delegate is hard. And this is something we train a lot of new managers on. They just hold on too tight. So one of my key takeaways for new managers is that success is that it's done 85% how you want it without you being involved. And it's going to require more of your time. If you think it's going to be 100% how you're going to like it, then you're going to get annoyed. Ronsley's going to come in. I'm going to not spend enough time with him. He's going to go do it. I'm going to tell him he did it wrong. I'm going to say, this is why I can't trust anyone. This is why I need to do everything myself. So you have to make the decision that, and that was for me, like, I'm not going to do it anymore. That's not an option. So how do I ensure that someone knows what's important to me, that there is a margin of error, that it won't be important, and start to really get excited when I can see that stuff is getting done that I'm not doing, and it's in that 85% range. I think if you hold your standard to 100%, it will never be how you do it, and maybe probably shouldn't be how you do it. That doesn't lead to any innovation either. But as a manager or someone who's switching to delegation, you've got to understand that is twice as much work up front. Like it is, I need to bring you on all of my calls for a week, do the calls, debrief them with you, not say, hey, Ronsley, jump on all these calls and have you screw them up without any training.
On this show, we have covered identity a lot. If you haven't listened to previous volumes on that, you should go check out our back catalog at psychologyofentrepreneurship.com. We get caught up in our identity, and that is hard to acknowledge, but also hard to ignore.
I actually take the same framework I just said, which is with a person, like how do we give you everything you need to be successful, right? Versus what are the realities of the role that are sort of non-negotiable and that's needed. And sometimes you can fix that gap and sometimes you can't, right? It's, let's say you're a rock star, controller, and you worked your way up from a bookkeeper and a controller, but the business needs a CFO, right? And you're not going to flip from a bookkeeper to a CFO in 3 years. And so your identity is very much tied up in being the right now you're the highest ranking financial person as the controller. And so even though you're doing great as a controller, we need the CFO. So your identity is really tied up into that. And someone who's good should say, God, I want to be a great controller. So I would love a CFO. I know I can't do that. Other people really, like, their pride gets in the way and they stop themselves from, unfortunately, like, they make it so that the organization, while they could have had a great longevity there, they really make it about them. In that case, they are not able to decouple that they're not doing a bad job, but what the organization needs is actually not what they have, or not even what they want to do. They might say, like, I don't want to be a CFO, but they struggle with not being the top finance person in the organization. So I've made a lot of mistakes in this area, but we've just gotten really good at depersonalizing that and saying, like, my job, I want to give you as much training and be the best controller you can be. But we're actually now at the point where we need a CFO and we're going to hire a CFO. So if you're not going to be able to get over that, then we need to know that now. But I'm telling you, as a leader, I am not letting you be CFO because you're not qualified. And you're not qualified based on the business needs. Those are tough decisions to have, but we've had them a lot, particularly for a fast-growing company. We can see when the company's needs are outgrowing a person. And it's not that person's doing anything wrong. Like, most people can't get 50% better a year or 40% better a year. Like 10 or 20% better would be great. I mean, that's kind of like a major jump every 3 or 4 years in level. But in a fast-growing company, you really can get in trouble letting your supply dictate your demand. To me, like, demand is demand. What the organization needs is what the organization needs.
So Robert's latest exploits are Friday Forwards. A link of where you can find that will be in the show notes. And I encourage you all to join this email list. Yes, it is an email list. But there are over 200,000 people in 60 countries that read his weekly Friday Forward. That's kind of crazy. But I needed to give you context about Friday Forwards before I let Rob say this.
Yeah, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago in response to a Friday Forward, I mean, I dove into some more complicated issues, particularly around the COVID stuff. I've always tried to stay away from politics. What's interesting is I've tried to look at the leadership aspect of it, which people, I can detach policy from leadership, but when you want to talk about leadership, people drag politics into it, dramatically. Like, I think our leaders are not leading in a lot of cases. That to me, has nothing to do with a policy or politics. But someone's like, I really appreciate you just put yourself out there, week after week, knowing that you're going to, these people are going to kind of tear you apart on that. I was like, look, this is just what I believe in. It is just, so I mean, saying what I believe in, I guess it might be brave, but I've just gotten used to it at this point. And maybe a lot of people don't feel like they have the freedom to do that.
On the topic of speaking up and using your voice, performance specialist Rick Gibbs had this gem of knowledge to share when talking about how managers can encourage employees to speak up more in the workplace. A key objective of management should be to create a workplace in which staffers feel comfortable sharing concerns or ideas without the fear of ridicule or retaliation. Leaders can lay the groundwork by voicing honest feedback or concerns with workers, leading by example, and demonstrating that all opinions are valued.
I'm guilty of using titles wrong. I called myself CEO way before I was one, and I did learn a lot along the way. Especially, I learned to justify the title that I held. And I changed a lot.
Yeah, look, there's also titling and leveling. So, a lot of times for a comp system is based on leveling. And there might be some area where you have a higher title, but your level is M1 or A2 or something like that, so that it normalizes. So you make that exception. But to me, it's just a lot about the values and the type of people that you want, right? So there's people who want the title. The people who want the title often didn't get it somewhere else, and they want to come to your company to get the title raise. Then they're just going to take the trade up and move somewhere else. In fact, one of the things you want to look for in employees is employees that grew in place, that didn't leave. This is like sports, that I always find it fascinating that everyone else pays a ton of money from free agent for everyone else's player. That team had the ability to pay that person more, and they knew them really, really well. And the team that didn't know them well paid them more. So similarly, you want someone who was able to grow in place. But I do think this comes back to most of these things are about hiring and having the right culture. And I can tell you that people super concerned about title don't really match up to our culture, because the people come in and like, I want to do stuff. I want to get stuff done. I want to be responsible. I want to be accountable. That would be a big red flag for us based on our culture. So I think you're hiring and getting your hiring right and really making sure you're finding people aligned to the core values eliminates a lot of problems with this. Our core values are own it, embrace relationships, and excel and improve. And so someone who's really whiny about title, it doesn't tend to align to a lot of those.
So Friday Forwards started as this thing he did, which by now, like me, you must be thinking, Rob is so precise. He has systems and ways to achieve on mass scale. Well, maybe. Or it was just like art based on his core values.
I think it came out of me getting clarity on my values, and I started it because it was aligned to my values. I wasn't worried about making money on it. I remember I hit this inflection point where I was looking for external validation. So I called my friend David Niu, who was the head of Tiny Pulse, which is a big engagement platform. And I said to him, I knew he liked the Friday Forwards. And I said, hey, I was sort of looking for him to tell me it was worthwhile. Would you put these to your community? And he was like, I love Friday Forward, but it's not the right thing for our software. I don't know how to get it in there. And I remember where I was at a hotel, and I was looking for someone else to be to tell me that it was sort of worthwhile. And I remember being bleep it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep going with it. I'm not looking. I feel like it's very values aligned. I don't think you can make a bad decision that's values aligned. And I remember my team being like, why aren't you putting our company name on this? How do we make money? Why are you spending time on this? But again, this goes to me you should stop the stuff that makes money that's not values aligned. And if you do the stuff that's that has changed my life and my business in a way. I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't have these books in a way I could have never imagined. But I had to just decide to do it and do it the best that I possibly could. And then, not worry about what it would mean, give to other people and create value, and just worry that what it would mean for me, push that off into the outside. If I had tried to do that early on, I don't think it would have. Everyone always can I sponsor a Friday Forward? Will you write about this? And it's no, I've never messed with the integrity of it, which is why, I have a separate newsletter if I'm pushing something or selling something.
Sometimes it is important to understand where core values are important, and when you just have to remind yourself about what they really are.
Part of it is building a list, testing it, refining it. So I walk through the process. The course is only about an hour, but the work is not an hour. So one of the things I ask people to do is there's some specific questions that I want them to answer on 6 different pieces of paper. in different ways. And we've tested this over the years, and then start to look for the themes. And as you bring those themes together by the different ways of answering those questions, you will start to get the thematic of one of a core value. You won't have the label on it, but you'll get the thematic. I'll tell you that one of the really interesting things, and I've not heard this elsewhere, but I've discovered this, that the way you determine whether you have a correct core value is to create an avatar of someone that represents the opposite. And because again, and it should just, that person, you're at a party. So if you tell me your core value is X, I will say, okay, so you're at a party, you need a person, and they are like Y, and they are talking to you. Like, what's your reaction? And if you're like, like it's kryptonite, get this person, because they actually literally embody the violation of your core value. And it should feel terrible, and you should not want to get near that person. And look, sometimes you can argue that those are just bad things, but other times, like one person's core value could be the inverse of someone else's core value, right? They could be someone who is just like creation and destruction, and the other who's like reliability and safety, right? And if they're in a discussion, they're around those issues, they are not going to be on the same page. And someone can say, hey, I want to, or someone asked me today about doing a joint venture with them. Like, I can look down on that and be like, does this hit 4 or 5 out of 5, or is it 1 out of 5? Like, it's just from a decision-making process, it's incredibly helpful.
Psychology of entrepreneurship.
It's the Psychology of Entrepreneurship's first birthday. So to celebrate, we're going to sift through our older volumes and highlight some of our favourite moments from the conversations Ronsley has had throughout the series with some of the most incredible entrepreneurs. From Philip McKernan to Melissa Ambrosini, we've had the pleasure of taking in the wisdom of industry leaders over the past year to try and piece together the psychology behind our decisions. But most importantly, to understand that we aren't alone in our battles with our inner critics, telling us that we aren't good enough. So if you want a short course on how these entrepreneurs have shifted their mindsets towards success, make sure you tune in to hear some of the little gems we've collected over the past year.
Psychology of entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Rob because Robert Glazer is the founder and CEO of global partner marketing agency Acceleration Partners and the co-founder and chairman of Brand Cycle. Under his leadership, Acceleration Partners has received numerous company culture awards and was also selected as a Forbes Small Giant. He is a columnist for Entrepreneur, Forbes, Thrive Global, and Inc. He is the author of the global best-selling book Performance Partnerships and the bestseller Elevate. His news book, go check that out, Friday Forward, releases this September 2020. He's a speaker on a variety of different fronts, including business growth, culture, capacity building, and performance. His Friday Forwards go to over 200,000 people in 60 countries. He is a father, a very, very accomplished entrepreneur, and friend.
Psychology of entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bunnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Kaylee Bunnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Hey, it's Kaylee from Must Amplify. I'm the sound engineer for this volume of Psychology of Entrepreneurship. I'm part of the team that made this production come alive. I work as a part of a global team with our studios based in West End, Brisbane, Australia. If you would like a podcasting checklist, email me at kaylee@amplifyagency.media. That's KAILI@amplifyagency.media. We specialize in finding your voice and making sure it's heard by the right people. If you are considering whether a podcast is a good idea for your business, check out our other show on shouldistartapodcast.com. Are you still listening? Here's a little gift to you for sticking around.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome.
Most importantly, how to build everything. Bleh. When we come back, playing to our strengths, you're going to use that in the blooper, aren't you?